You know, when we think about how people build their lives, we often use like the metaphor of construction.
Right, like building a house or something.
Yeah, exactly. You put up this massive, elaborate scaffolding, your beliefs, your heroes, your political ideologies, and that scaffolding, it helps you reach higher.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a sense of structure.
Right.
But I think most importantly, it makes you feel safe against, well, the chaos of the world.
Absolutely. It's a buffer.
But, and this is the core of today's deep dive,
Mm-hmm.
what happens when you dismantle that scaffolding? Like pipe by pipe, until there's absolutely nothing left but you, just standing completely alone on the bare ground.
I mean, it is a deeply, deeply unsettling place to put yourself psychologically.
Yeah.
Because that scaffolding isn't just a set of ideas we passively hold. It forms the very architecture of how we make sense of our existence.
Right.
It's how we process grief, how we understand our place in the universe. So stripping it away means facing a kind of nakedness that, honestly, most people spend their entire lives trying to avoid.
Which is exactly why we are thrilled you could join us today, because we are unpacking something that forces you to confront that exact nakedness.
We really are.
Our source material today is this fascinating, highly detailed German literary analysis of John Lennon's song lyrics, specifically for the track simply titled God.
It's an incredible text.
It really is. And the mission of this deep dive, just to be clear, isn't to just give you a basic music review of a classic track. We're exploring how a simple pop song functions as a radical philosophical deconstruction of myth, of meaning, and of human idolatry.
Yeah, it goes way beyond just music criticism.
Way beyond. So whether you are someone who is like highly analytical or you're just insanely curious about human nature, this analysis offers some massive aha moments about why human beings cling so desperately to systems of belief.
Yeah, looking closely at the breakdown of these lyrics in the text, the overarching theme is really a relentless disenchantment.
Relentless is a good word for it.
Right. The analysis treats the song not as a piece of pop entertainment, but as an absolute masterclass in stripping away illusions.
Mm-hmm.
It maps out how the lyricist systematically dismantles, well, everything, from massive religious frameworks down to everyday pop culture,
Leaving you with what?
leaving the listener with an incredibly raw, almost uncomfortable look at human reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you are going to demolish the entire human belief system, you kind of have to start at the top, right?
You do.
Before we can even begin to understand the specific heroes and myths being rejected here, we have to look at how the source text defines the ultimate authority,
The big one.
right? The very first target in the song is the overarching concept of God.
And the opening lines establish a highly provocative framework right from the very first second. The lyrics state, and this is crucial, God is a concept by which we measure our pain.
I mean, that is a staggering way to open a pop song.
It really sets the tone.
It completely redefines the premise of religion. It's like religion is being described here not as a literal window to the divine or, some beautiful, comforting truth handed down from above.
Right.
It's being described as a psychological ruler or a thermometer that we invented purely to quantify our own suffering. I mean, is the analysis essentially framing belief as nothing more than a coping mechanism?
It is, but it goes even deeper than just coping. What's fascinating here is what this literary analysis brilliantly uncovers about the specific, deliberate use of the word concept.
Okay, tell me more about that.
The insight here is that God is not presented as a divine reality or an independent external power that exists outside of us. Instead, God is explicitly categorized as a human construct.
Ah, a construct.
Exactly. The formulation by which we measure our pain implies a psychological mechanism. It suggests religious ideas are born entirely out of human necessity.
A necessity triggered by suffering. Because when you think about it, raw, unfiltered pain, whether it's, the loss of a loved one or just the existential dread of being alive, it's chaotic.
It's totally chaotic.
It's overwhelming. And if you don't have a way to measure it, it just consumes you. So we invent the ruler.
That is the core psychological mechanism at play here. When people are faced with profound suffering or powerlessness or massive existential questions, they actively seek a container for that chaos.
We need a box to put it in.
Exactly. They need to make sense of their vulnerability. So within the framework of this analysis, the ultimate authority functions as a projection screen.
A projection screen. Wow.
Yeah, it's a product of human helplessness. We project our desperate need for order, for justice, and for meaning onto this overarching concept, simply to manage our reality.
And what's wild is that the lyricist doesn't just, state this once and move on. He turns it into a chant.
He really does.
He repeats that opening statement over and over.
And that repetition serves a very specific structural purpose in the text. It sounds like a conscious commitment, almost like a mantra.
But not a typical one.
No, the analysis makes a crucial distinction here. It operates as a negative mantra.
Negative how?
Well, traditional mantras are designed to build up a spiritual truth or, elevate the mind. But this song works entirely through disenchantment. It uses repetition to ground the listener in the absolute bleakness of the premise.
Right. And right in the middle of that mantra, there's that inserted line, pain. Yeah.
That specific interjection acts as a focal point. It violently directs the listener's attention away from the lofty concept of the divine and strictly toward the physical, visceral reality of pain.
It brings it right back down to earth.
Exactly. The analysis concludes that in the universe of this song, pain is established as the fundamental, inescapable dimension of human experience.
It's the baseline.
It is the baseline.
Yeah.
And it is precisely out of this foundational pain that all human belief systems are generated.
So the ultimate highest authority has just been reframed as a tool we use because we hurt.
Basically, yes.
But recognizing God as a coping mechanism opens a really dangerous door, I think. Because if the ultimate authority is just a projection screen, well, what happens to all the smaller, everyday authorities we look up to?
Right, the whole system is in danger.
Exactly. The song doesn't stop at religion. It cascades down from that massive concept of a deity into the very specific systems, structures, and heroes that human beings build just to get through the day.
Which brings us to the next major section of the text. This part focuses on a long, sweeping series of negations.
The famous sequence.
Yeah. The lyrics launch into a repetitive sequence, systematically stating, "I don't believe in," followed by a cultural pillar.
Right, the I don't believe in sequence. The analysis formally describes this as an anti-creed, right?
An anti-creed or anti-Glaubensbekenntnis in the original German analysis.
Anti-Glaubensbekenntnis, got it.
Think about how a traditional creed functions. In a religious setting, a congregation stands up and declares what they believe in.
Like the Apostles' Creed or something.
But exactly. That act of shared belief binds the community together. It creates a collective identity. But here, the speaker inverts that entire psychological process.
By listing what he doesn't believe in.
Yes. By systematically listing everything they do not believe in, the speaker is actively severing ties with the collective. They are untethering themselves from the community's shared scaffolding.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the sheer breadth of this list is staggering. We aren't just talking about a couple of obvious targets here.
No, it covers everything.
The list covers esoteric and spiritual systems, things like magic, the I Ching, tarot, mantras, yoga. Then it hits massive religious figures and texts, the Bible, Jesus, Buddha, then pivots into political and social authorities, kings, and specifically figures like Hitler and Kennedy.
And then pop culture.
Right. Finally, his pop culture idols. Elvis, Zimmerman, meaning Bob Dylan, and of course the Beatles.
It is a vast, sweeping categorization of human culture.
But hold on, I really need to push back on this because reading that list out loud feels incredibly jarring.
I know, it really does.
Like equating yoga with Adolf Hitler, putting Jesus next to the tarot and then throwing in John F. Kennedy and Elvis. That feels, it feels incredibly reductive.
It's meant to provoke.
But how can the author of this analysis possibly justify putting a dictator, a spiritual leader, and a pop star on the exact same moral playing field?
Well, the discomfort you are feeling is entirely intentional, and the analysis actually spends significant time addressing it. It is vital to understand that the song is not equating their morality or their historical actions or their intrinsic value.
Okay.
We really have to look at this impartially, strictly through the analytical lens provided by the source text. The lyricist isn't debating the individual merits or flaws of these figures at all.
So he isn't saying that, believing in yoga is as bad as believing in a dictator?
Not at all. The argument being made is that, within the context of the human psyche, all of these incredibly diverse figures and concepts function identically.
Identically how?
They are external authorities. They are all systems, symbols, or leaders that people look toward for orientation.
Nice.
Whether it's a political leader promising a utopian society, a spiritual practice promising inner peace, or a pop star offering a cultural identity, they all serve as projection screens. They absorb human hope, longing, and the desperate need for direction.
Oh, wow. So they are all just different flavors of scaffolding used to measure our pain.
That is the core insight of the text. And the sheer linguistic brevity of the list, the fact that he doesn't pause to offer a nuanced argument against any of them, is what gives the song its uncompromising tone.
He just rattles them off.
Exactly. The speaker doesn't discuss, the speaker discards. The analysis describes this as delivering the impression of a total reckoning.
A total reckoning. By putting holy scriptures, political leaders, and mass idols all on the same level, he just flattens the entire human hierarchy of meaning.
He levels the playing field completely.
And because he just goes from one to the next, rapid fire, it doesn't sound like someone who is openly searching for answers. It sounds like someone who has already crossed the finish line of their own disillusionment.
Right, the internal separation has already been completed. It is the sound of someone surveying the wreckage after the illusions have already been torn down.
But, tearing down external historical figures and cultural icons is one thing. It's relatively easy to point at society and say, your heroes are fake.
Sure.
But the text points out a crucial, honestly explosive escalation at the very end of this anti-creed. The lyricist doesn't just critique the outside world. He turns the weapon completely inward.
And this marks the shift from societal critique to the deeply personal. The long litany of rejections ends with one final world-shifting negation.
Beatles.
Exactly, Beatles, or I don't believe in Beatles.
Which is huge. It's one thing to say you don't believe in Elvis. It is entirely another to say you don't believe in the very phenomenon that made you.
The source text argues that this specific line holds enormous explosive power. Up until this point, the speaker has been rejecting the myths constructed by others.
Right.
But with this single word, the lyricist breaks with the cult created around his own past. He is actively destroying his own collective legend.
It's like being the Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah.
But instead of waiting for Toto to pull back the curtain and expose you, you pull it back yourself, grab the microphone, and tell the massive, adoring crowd to go home because the magic isn't real.
That's a great way to put it.
He's destroying the very machine that gave him power and influence.
And importantly, he acknowledges his own complicity in building that machine. The lyrics state, "I was the dreamweaver, but now I'm reborn."
I was the dream weaver. The self-criticism there is intense.
It really is.
He admits he wasn't just like a passive victim swept up in these cultural myths. He was the weaver. He intentionally spun the illusions that millions of people projected their hopes and pain onto.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the broader psychological breakdown in the analysis, we see a profound contrast being drawn regarding identity.
How so?
Well, the text highlights the lines, "I was the walrus, but now I'm John." The walrus references a previous, highly surreal song of his, but in this context, it represents something much larger.
It represents the persona.
Exactly. The artificial, pop-culturally charged mask. The walrus is this symbolic, mythical self-image that exists only to feed the public's need for an idol.
And John?
By contrast, John represents the authentic claim to simply being a flesh-and-blood human being. Shedding that mask signals a refusal to be a projection screen for the masses any longer. It is the definitive transition from the public art figure to the private self.
Which brings us to the most critical and honestly the most difficult pivot in the entire analysis. We've watched the overarching concept of God get dismantled.
Yep.
We've seen the long list of societal systems, religious icons, and political figures discarded. And we've just witnessed the deliberate public execution of his own personal legend.
The stage is completely empty.
Exactly. So once the grand external myths and the personal legends are utterly destroyed, what is actually left to stand on? When the scaffolding is entirely gone, what does the bare ground look like?
What remains is a surprisingly simple, almost stark counterformula. After all the grand negations, the lyrics offer this singular foundation. I just believe in me, Yoko and me, and that's reality.
I just believe in me. The analysis makes a massive deal out of that word, just, doesn't it?
It does. The word just acts as the ultimate psychological boundary here. It sounds limiting, yet it is deeply final. Belief is radically, almost violently reduced to the immediate private sphere.
So no more grand ideas.
Right. The analysis emphasizes that in this new reality, there are no transcendent promises of salvation waiting in the afterlife. There are no political or societal saviors coming to fix the world. All that is left to rely on is the concrete, unadorned life of two human beings.
So what does this all mean for the listener?
That's the big question.
The text seems to deeply wrestle with how to categorize this ending. Is it a triumphant victory over illusion, or is it a tragic, devastating loss of meaning? Because the lyrics go on to address the fans directly.
They do.
He says the dream is over. And then he follows it up with, and so, dear friends, you'll just have to carry on. I have to be honest, telling your friends and followers that their dream is dead and they just have to carry on sounds incredibly cold. It feels like abandonment.
It is undeniably harsh, and the analysis spends a lot of time exploring this strong tension between liberation and loss. The turn inward is, on one level, entirely liberating.
Liberation from what?
The speaker refuses to be deceived anymore. He stops fleeing into abstract teachings, political ideologies, or pop culture idols just to avoid his own pain. He is finally free from the burden of the myth.
The freedom of dropping the heavy mask and just breathing as yourself.
Exactly. But the analysis explicitly notes that this conclusion is simultaneously deeply sobering, almost profoundly disillusioned. The lyricist strips away all the false idols, but he doesn't replace them with a new grand truth.
He doesn't offer a backup plan.
No. He doesn't offer a new philosophy to make the pain go away. He simply leaves a void.
And that's reality. Reality isn't some shiny new enlightenment.
The text emphasizes that reality in this framework is not portrayed as glamorous or sublime or even particularly comforting. It is small, direct, and merely human. It is just waking up, existing, and dealing with your own pain without a filter.
And the dream that he declares is over.
The dream symbolizes the entire architecture we've been discussing, the collective utopias, idealizations, religious hopes, cultural myths, and, the era of the 1960s pop culture revolution itself.
It's all gone.
Declaring the dream over operates as a sober reckoning. It creates a stark, unforgiving contrast between wishful thinking and sober self-knowledge.
So when he turns to his fans and says, you'll just have to carry on, he's not offering a hug or a roadmap. He's handing them back their own responsibility.
The analysis describes this moment as reading almost like a formal farewell speech. The address, "Dear friends," seems warm on the surface, but it actually creates a deliberate distancing effect.
Like, I love you, but you're on your own.
Pretty much. The speaker is turning to the listeners and telling them, you have to live on without this dream. You can no longer use me to measure your pain. The text is very clear that this is not meant to comfort the listener. There is absolutely no attempt to cushion the blow of the loss.
It's an unsparingly honest, completely sobering wake-up call. It's essentially saying, the scaffolding is gone, figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet.
And that is where the true intensity of the song lies. It is not a positive confession of faith where everything wraps up with a neat moral.
Right.
It is a text of disillusionment, of self-assertion, and of painful honesty. It forces everyone involved to face reality entirely without the padding of myth.
Which brings this entirely back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. This analysis isn't just a historical look at a 1970s pop star trying to shed his fame. It operates as a mirror for modern life.
Absolutely.
We all have our concepts. We all have the idols, the political figures, the wellness trends, or the pop culture icons that we use to measure our pain and find meaning. We all have our own version of the Dreamweaver.
We do.
And what this deep dive challenges us to do is to recognize our own projection screens, to look at the things we blindly put our faith in and ask if they are actually true, or if they are just psychological tools we use, because the raw, unfiltered reality of human existence is too chaotic to handle alone.
Which naturally leads to a final, profound observation from the source text regarding how this message is delivered.
Oh, about the language.
Yes.
Yeah.
The analysis points out that the song manages to achieve this massive, heavy, philosophical deconstruction using incredibly simple, direct language.
Yeah, there's no rich imagery, there are no flowery metaphors or complex poetic structures.
The sentences are short, decisive, and uncompromising. The text argues that it is exactly this stark simplicity that gives the deconstruction its power.
It matches the message.
Exactly. By stripping away all linguistic ornamentation, it mirrors the stripping away of the myths. It pulls the ground out from under everything sublime and replaces it with a sober, purely personal declaration of truth, which leaves us with a final thought to ponder based on the core argument of this text.
Let's hear it.
If we were to apply this uncompromising lens to our own lives, if we were to successfully strip away all the comforting metaphors, the ideologies, and the dreams we weave to protect ourselves, leaving only a simple, unadorned, small reality, would that bare reality actually be enough to sustain us? Or, as the opening of the song suggests, is human pain simply too great to measure without a concept?
Man, if you take away the scaffolding, can the building actually stand on its own, or does it collapse under its own weight?
It's a tough question.
It's a haunting question, and one that absolutely lingers long after the music stops. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of belief, the psychology of myth, and the terrifying freedom of reality. We hope this gave you some powerful new ways to look at the concepts in your own life. Until next time.